Well, hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your pal, James Avramenko, back once again with a brand new episode. This week, I'm joined by theater producer, treasurer, board member extraordinaire, and all-around incredible fella, Landon Walliser. I met Landon through my work in the Saskatoon theater scene, so buckle up because this episode is theater heavy. It was an absolute treat to catch up with him, though, and I think you're going to love this one. So for now, lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy my interview with the one and only Landon Walliser here on Friendless. So this week on Friendless, I have an old friend from Saskatoon, a former board member of the SPC. I'm not even sure if you're still involved in that. We can talk about that, but and all kinds of other. He's a member of all kinds of other theater communities. The one, the only Landon Walliser. How are you today?
I'm all right, James. I am anxious as ever.
Oh no,
Otherwise, good.
anxious.
Not about this. It's general anxiety.
Yes, the overall the overhanging malaise of it all, right?
Correct.
Yes. So just to get the ball rolling, I always start with just like really blunt, very sledgehammery question of Landon. Who the hell are you?
So I guess the best way that I would describe myself is I'm a theater artist based in Regina. Um, for those listening, James and I have never actually met in person.
That's
We
right. Oh my
were in
god,
a
I didn't even
million
realize that.
meetings together for like the entirety of the pandemic, and that's how we met each other. But we have never met in person.
Wow. I never even registered that. That's incredible.
No, because when you moved from Saskatoon, my first thought was I was like, there goes the chance. Like, now I don't know if I'll ever see James again.
Crazy. And what's so funny is like the moment you came on the call, it was immediately so familiar to me because this is the exact
Yeah.
angle I've known you as. Like it's like a kids show where it's just always the exact same angle and it's just like the big friendly giant kind of thing, you know?
It's a big comfy couch, except it's not
Mhm.
that comfy and it's falling apart. Uh,
Fair, fair.
but I guess to answer the question, I am a theater artist based in Regina. Um, I work primarily as a director and producer, and I've kind of just been employed by a bunch of different companies. I was the intern artistic director, um, or artistic directing intern. I can't remember how they worded it with the Globe for a while, working with the artistic director Jennifer Bruin. I'm the producer for the women's company. I am the creative administrator for On Cue, and I am still a volunteer for the Sask Playwright Center board of directors, and I am still the
Gotcha.
treasurer. Although I've been trying to get out of the treasury position for forever because I'm treasurer or like in charge of financials for way too many things.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I mean, I don't want to launch directly into too much theater talk, although I think that it's going to be unavoidable with you. But it's like it was funny the experience of boards because like treasurers are so rare because so few people are um financially literate on in the theater world. So it's like it's a really treasured position, very rare. You're like a shiny Pokemon.
Having now had so much experience doing financials for different organizations, it also I think is a lot like that on my end because I'll look at something for one organization and I'm like, this makes complete sense to me, and then I look at something for another organization, even if I've been there for forever, and I'm like, this is gibberish.
Yes.
I have no concept of what this is because especially when it's financial speak. Every time we have to do an audit or I have to work with an auditor, I'm like, I can give you all the info I have, but like if you tell me something in auditor language,
Yeah.
I'm done. I have no
Literally.
idea what you're talking about. You need to explain it to me in the most basic terms.
Oh yeah. I used to always feel so bad when I worked for the SPC. I always felt so bad because whenever financial stuff would come up, and we would either be talking to the first accountant we had or the new ones, and they would be asking me this stuff, and I would just be like, "Well, this is the file I have." Like I have no idea. I wish I could help you, but this is what I have. These are numbers, and they're terrifying to me. So help, you know.
The thing I've established is even people who think they know what's going on in the arts, though, if they're not accountants, it seems that they really just don't know. I had someone who's done it for years, very experienced, who was like, I want this kind of report. And I was like, great. Went, learned how to do that report for them, started giving that report for the monthly check-in with them. And they were like, this isn't what I want at all. I want this other thing. And I'm like, that is not even functionally the same as what you have asked for.
Yeah.
It's the strangest thing.
Yeah. Well, the whole board system. I mean, I
Yeah.
just everything, so to give you a little context for myself, just cuz like we haven't spoken in like 2 years. Like I have like no contact whatsoever with theater. I'm just like completely fundamentally out of it.
I
And
wondered that
so yeah,
actually.
no, I'm just like I was just done. And so it's so funny like reconnecting with theater people because it in some ways it feels like how do I put this like without sounding like a dickhead? It's like in some ways it feels like I've been kind of like deprogrammed from the cult, you know? And I look back, I feel like that woman who does that like Going Clear documentary, who's
Yeah,
like
Leah Remini.
thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And I look and I hear about the problems and I'm like, that's nuts. You should just get a job. you know? It's not fucking worth it. It's just not worth it at all. And hearing how many different, responsibilities you hold in the community, it just sounds so like my heart immediately starts racing. And I
Oh,
like how do you hold that stuff down? How do you hold it together?
I honestly don't really know because,
Yeah.
like, I'm not a drinker really, outside of socially. I do take, CBD as anxiety medication, but my
Okay.
anxiety is completely not related to my job,
Right. Yeah.
uh, at least in any sort of, like, main way. I'm
Sure.
sure it is based in a stress way, but
Yep.
I don't know. And it's one of those weird things because me and, as you know, my brother and my sister are also theater people.
Mhm.
We all work in kind of similar streams of it, as well as like kind of our individual streams. Like Rachel and Carson both do costume. I don't really do costume, but Carson also kind of does directing. Carson and Rachel do writing. Um, and like it comes and goes in waves. A lot of the time it's fine. There's some days where, like I think with any kind of like art form where you want to be done with it. It's
Yes.
so it's so hard to feel like sticking with it because you're not getting the projects off the ground that you want to get off the ground, or you're not getting the
Mhm.
funding for whatever.
Mhm.
But no, I do think it is. I think most things kind of have that cult speak when you get into them far enough. Any kind of job where there's like a culture around it too has
Yes.
that. And the arts in particular, because they're also like they have their own kind of funding model, especially in
Mhm.
Canada. It's
Mhm.
very difficult
Mhm.
to not get sucked into like the culture of
Yes.
the work.
Well, and what was strange for me, forgive me, I'm not trying to like do some kind of like gotcha journalism here, but but it's just to me, it's really interesting to be able to talk to someone like you because you have experience on both sides of the stage, which is something that I really value, and not everyone in the community does have that experience between like doing the creative side, but also the administrative side, and it's
Yeah.
sometimes really hard to discuss the logistics of how a theater organization genuinely runs with people who only do the creative side because
Yes.
a lot of times there's this attitude of like, well, that doesn't make sense, just don't do that. And it's like, no, you fundamentally have no idea how a board works or like how like a not-for-profit works. And so it's like that's not possible, and that's fucked. You're right, it should work better, but it doesn't. And the way I think creatives attack the problem doesn't often actually solve the grander problem of the system.
No, it
They're sort of
doesn't. And I think
band-aidy.
that there's also like there's a really kind of unique issue in my mind of Saskatchewan for sure, but I think probably it extends across the prairies more generally because we have so few kind of like larger scale theaters where there
Mm,
is also just this kind of like inherent lack of experience in
yes.
working in like larger scale professional theater. And so when you start getting groups that are kind of moving into that of their own accord for whatever reason,
Hmm.
um the problems become incredibly clear, either because they don't know like roughly how like a professional kind of like organization should run or how they would organize something, but also because there's inherent flaws in the professional system that don't really like
Yeah.
match up with some of these things that you need them to match up with when you're working with like, community groups or grassroots groups.
Hmm. So let's take it back a little bit though, because I want to, I'd love to figure out what got you to, what got you to the dance in terms of like when you joined the SPC board. Like where did your sort of where did this uh, how do I put it? Who hurt you? You know, where did this anxious attachment to theater come from?
I mean, I'd been doing theater for a long time by the time I joined the board. I had done theater pretty much since I was 13 in, one way or another. Mostly that obviously from the time you're 13 is like through school,
Of
but I
course.
also did it through a couple like summer programs and things like that. And then I went to university and I originally was not enrolled in theater. I was enrolled in education for like
Mm.
one very sad week that I did not attend classes. This was before actual semester had started. I was in education because I was just like, oh, like that'll be a good safety net. And then I had the enrollment letter for like a week, and I was like, I absolutely do not want to do that.
Mm.
And then switched into the film program. I did the film program for my whole first semester, and I did really like it. Um, but it wasn't teaching the things I really wanted to learn. It was a lot of like technical stuff around how cameras work, how to frame shots, which was stuff that I had more experience in and was, relatively comfortable learning outside of a classroom. And the things that I wanted to learn in the classroom, like how to direct actors, um, like the fundamentals of storytelling and of script
Mhm.
development, stuff like that, that I felt was really good to learn with another person or with a group of people, was not what they focus on in the first year of film at the University of Regina,
Sure.
or they didn't at the time. This was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So went into the theater department, did theater for my whole degree, finished my theater degree in 2016. And then I was working on a show that we toured for a couple of years, kind of came back. There was this big kind of call to action from the Regina community shortly after we got back from that tour because nobody was getting professional jobs
Mm.
here. So people were kind of stuck in this limbo between vocational and avocational theater, even if they had been trained in, pretty much every way, shape, or form. You could be trained for a vocation in theater. They just weren't getting work here.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so there was this big kind of like call to action from the community around how can we change that? Where are the problems? What's going on? And then COVID happened.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I joined the board in the middle of COVID because I got a call from a professor that I used to work with who basically said, "We need people on the board." And I said,
Mhm.
"Sure," because there was nothing else going on for theater
Yeah.
at the time. And
And you've never been able to shake free since, eh?
not since technically based on board terms, I'm probably supposed to be ending after this year. It should be like a
Right.
3-year term.
Right.
Um, but I mean, you were there for most of it, so we had
Yeah.
some fun adventures. We got
Yes.
some great money. The Digital Now grant that you wrote is like just finishing up now. We filmed a bunch of shows, so we're going to have
Great.
a little spring fest of new work.
Amazing.
Um, yeah.
Um, what is the experience like on your end, as a board member? Because it strikes me as just such a bizarre. It's like this weird. You have like the boards have like too much power in not for profit organizations, as I see it, but they also like are usually volunteers. So it's this really bizarre push pull of like no one on the board really wants to do anything, but they also are sort of technically the ones in like they're the shadowy back room of theater,
Yeah.
and I'm curious what your experience has been like in in as much as I guess you're comfortable to talk about because maybe you don't want to be like
Well,
being too
like I've said before, I'm kind of also I'm on enough boards or
yeah
have involvement with enough boards that I can talk about them pretty freely because there's like 4 or 5 that I have involvement with or have had involvement with over the years. And it really kind of has varied. The I was on a board when I was first in university for a while, which functioned really well. It was actually a really great board. And then my partner at the time cheated on me with the board chair.
Mm,
So that fell apart.
fabulous.
Fabulous. But of the ones I'm currently on, it's it's really varied. Some are like organizations where they don't have enough funding to do what they want to do. They need a lot of like we just there needs to be a lot of help from the boards. The boards kind of always stepping up to the plate, always trying to find funding,
Mm,
um, get things to a place where they're able to kind of just like function on as day to day operations. And then there's others where I'm answering to a board or I'm like in a like kind of member at large capacity, and those boards are usually larger and more well established, not always but usually more well established, which I think are obviously a lot nicer to be on.
mm,
They're a lot less stressful to be on,
mhm.
but at the same time you usually have a lot higher level of responsibility. There's usually a lot more oversight,
Yes,
um, and or a lot more disagreement among the members of those types of boards.
sure.
Um,
I guess
yeah.
when you're the board of an organization that has one employee, it's a little it's a little different than like
Well,
an
and like
actual company.
with On Cue, like now it's weird because I was on the board basically as a volunteer co-creator of the organization, and now I am the employee, so I answer to
Right.
the steering committee. They don't call themselves a board.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, so that's fun because then there's also a different side of that because I am the
Mhm.
only employee of a large
Yeah.
organization.
The
Wild.
real roots of this whole project is the exploration of friendship and intimacy and connection and all these kinds of that whole cloud of sentiments. And at the end of the day, it really boils down to the question of what it means to be a friend, and realizing that what a lofty and open-ended question that is. I love putting it to guests, to kind of get their personal interpretations on it. So that's where I'll start. Is to you, what does it mean to be a friend?
Uh, so when I looked over this, when you sent it several weeks ago and you kind of sent the introductory package, I was thinking about it a lot. And I think what I kind of boiled it down to, in my head at least, is that it's someone who can be there for you.
Hmm.
And that there's obviously like various shades of what that means. There's various kind of levels and shades of friendship. Like there's best friends who you would tell anything to, but you know that you probably can't be there for each other all the time for one reason or another, but you would
Mm-hmm.
tell them anything. And there's friends that you would always be there for, even if you might not tell them everything, and you might call them your best friend. There's
Mm,
just so many shades and kind of gradations of like what friendship means, but it kind of to me always boils down to that you're there for each other in some way.
mm. Do you find yourself? Are you someone who everyone's your best friend, or you have no best friends? Because
I find
I
I'm
find
closer to
everyone
having
is.
no best friends.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, I would say I have a few kind of, like, best friends, but they tend to be people I've known for a very long time.
Hmm.
Um, and they have, like, uh, this sounds bad. It's kind of like the final girl because it
Sure.
seems like one little stage of my life where that one person is the only one who makes it out as
Hmm.
my friend, and then we stay friends for a very long time.
Yeah.
Um, so, like,
But they
my
always die
partner.
in the sequel.
Oh, I'm sitting here wearing my Jason Voorhees cardigan. Um, but yeah, so like I have a best friend that like I've known since like preschool. Um, and we barely speak to each other just because of our lives being like that. But like if she's in town, we always try to see each other.
Hmm.
And then like I have a best friend from high school, who we usually talk every day. Like
Hmm.
or we usually text every day, I should say. We don't usually talk every day, but we text every day.
Hmm.
Um, and then like obviously like my partner is my best friend.
Yeah.
And like my brother and my sister and like my family are all like different kind of levels of best friend.
Hmm.
But yeah, it really depends. Like I can think of kind of like one person from each kind of little stage of my life. There's one person from elementary school, there's one person from middle school, one person from high
Mm.
school, one person from university, and then
Hmm.
otherwise it's like my family or my partner. And
Yeah. I love that. I envy. I think I don't know if envy is the right word, but like, my family, bless them. They all live on the other side of the country, right? Like they're all in like Nova Scotia, and so it's like really difficult to be close with my family, and I find myself, yeah, I guess I do come back to the word envious of people who have family nearby who can have those strong ties, because I oscillate all the time between like valuing chosen family over blood family, but I think having that option is something that I you know I think is a really beautiful opportunity in someone's life, and also, I mean, obviously I've met your sister. I've never met your brother, but like, seeing the bond that you had is something that's really like, what's the word for it, it looks like something that I wish I had, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like thankfully I didn't have to do that kind of like long distance family relationship for a long time. It's only been kind of in the last few years where my brother, because we all ended up going to school in Regina, so we were living together
Hmm.
here, and then my brother ended up going to do another degree program or a certificate program, I think, at Grant McEwen, and
Mm,
then his partner got into a school in Vancouver, so now he's in Vancouver.
gotcha.
um so now like we do have to function in a very different way, and
Mhm.
like I think the only thing that's made it slightly easier is that my partner for so long was also in the UK.
That's
So
right.
my family was all here and we were all very close kind of geographically, like at the very least within a few hours of each other, if not literally in the next room. But
Yeah.
he was 8 hours away and now he's here full time.
Okay, so
uh
he did get through because I
yeah.
remember especially because obviously during the pandemic he was like basically locked out, and I remember there was all kinds of drama going on about like him coming in, but like maybe not necessarily even being able to get into the country, and like that all kind of got settled through.
I mean, kind of. So we put in his application during the pandemic. That all happened. He got his permanent residency and was able to come over at the beginning of 2022. Um, he still has not received his PR card, which we've been
Oh
dealing with, and that's
shit!
been a whole nightmare. But he has his permanent residency. He just doesn't have the card.
Right.
Um, because it never showed up, and we put in requests, and then they never get answered, and then they answer them, and they just close them, and it's nonsense. But yes, he's here. um yeah, that was a nightmare, the 2 years
Yeah.
that, like, we had no idea when we'd be able to see each other again.
Yeah.
Horrendous.
How did you meet him?
We met online actually, and not through like a dating app or anything, back in 20 late 2013, really early 2014. He used to blog a lot, and he had
Mm.
done like a blog post about his kind of coming out story, and I had responded to it. And we just started chatting, and that was kind of it.
Adorable. And
Yeah,
had you ever met in person before him coming, like, through the pandemic, or had he been
yes,
coming and
yes,
going?
yes, yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, no, no. We had met multiple times. He had lived here before he was
Mm.
locked out during the pandemic. So he came here in 2014, about 6 months after we met for 2 weeks, and then came back in 2015 for another 2 weeks, which was a lot less fun. I was miserably sick during that one. Um, I had bronchitis. Ain't nobody got
Great.
time for that.
Yep.
Um, and then in 2016, I went over there for 2 weeks to meet his family. And then 2017, he came over for 6 months on a visitor's, like, tourist visa.
Mm,
And then he came back about 5 months after that for 2 years on a working visa. And then
gotcha.
at the end of that, he went back. And then about a month after he went back, the pandemic hit.
Lockdown. Oh my god, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
I remember hearing just snippets of it, and it just sounded like, it's moments like that where I was just like, "Ah, fuck it, open the borders," Like, it's like, because like, so much of me was like, "Lock it down, JT, like, who cares? Fuck them all," and then I'd hear
Yeah.
these stories, and I'd be like, "Okay, except for you can let him through,"
Well, and like it was so bad because he and a couple members of his family are like severely asthmatic. So because it was a fucking, like, the word is completely escaping, but because it was an illness that was affecting lungs and
Yeah.
everything, I was just like, it was never ending
Respiratory,
anxiety,
right?
James. I
Respiratory.
can't even tell you how bad the anxiety was when I would leave some of those Zoom meetings with you. Because I'm like, there were
Totally.
days where I was literally just like lying in bed hyperventilating.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh man. Um. Yeah. Well, God, and it's like it's not like it was better being in the UK. You know, like
no,
yeah.
no, and like they were in the middle of Brexit.
Oh God.
Oh God, everything. It's just everything was a nightmare. What is something you miss about not seeing each other as often as we used to? Keeping in mind we never met in person, but
I
we saw
know.
each other
Well, that's
frequently.
honestly the thing. That's the thing that kind of just boggled my mind when you mentioned that. Because yeah, we were talking, if not almost every day, like every week, no question. You know.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, and there were several times where a meeting would end and you and I would just stay on and
Well, and
chat.
that was, when I think about that, I think that's because I'm trying really hard not to default to like nothing because it's like it wasn't that at all. You know what I mean? It wasn't that at all. But like my impulse, just like because like my experience with SPC sucked. Just to be like honest about that.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciated about you was exactly what you brought up, which is that like we would end up chatting sometimes for a couple hours afterwards, and we would just shoot the shit, and it was just like we talked video games and movies, and like, and it was really like that was such a comfort to me, and was just such a relief and a bit of a release, in that it was like because those meetings could be so weird sometimes and so loaded and so like unnecessarily stressful for like what we were doing, and
Yeah.
then we'd sort of end the meeting and I would feel so like weird and janky, and then we would just talk about horror movies, or we would talk about something like that, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh,
I was
thank
like, you talked about
God,
your
okay.
Animal Crossing island that one time. I remember that.
Yes, right, exactly, right, and so, yeah, that was the stuff that I really, and throughout it all, like, I really appreciated you being on the board because I knew no matter how weird it was gonna get and the, like, on-camera meetings that you would have and all this stuff, I always knew that, like, I was never gonna how do I put it? It's like it's not like how do I say this? It's just it was just comforting to know I could look over at least to you and be like, there's at least somebody who like may not agree with me 100%, but like isn't gonna just like
But it's going to respect you as a person. Yeah.
exactly, right? Yeah, thanks for putting it like that because that's exactly right. Like yeah, I didn't need you to blindly support me, but like it was just nice to know I wasn't just like me against the whole board. And that was definitely a comfort for me.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it wasn't a great time for you for like a myriad of reasons.
Mm,
But I'm like, it felt so much more fun, I think, to have you.
yeah.
Um, no, that's not like fun in other ways now, but I'm like, I think like you and I did vibe in a way that I don't think I have with a lot of people that I've been on boards with. And
Totally.
even though, you weren't a board member, it was like it was just great to like listen to what you wanted to talk about. I thought you had such great ideas that you always brought to the table. I liked that you and I had kind of the same um type of ideas, I guess, in that
Mhm.
although we were like kind of working in the sphere of theater, we also like to think more untraditionally.
Yeah.
Like we talked about like how can you integrate podcast, how can you integrate publishing, how can you integrate all of these things into this
Mhm.
kind of like, especially in Saskatchewan, I think very siloed off community that
Exactly.
doesn't interact with these other art forms.
Yeah. Well, and that I think was always at the root of so many of my frustrations with the theater community in general was that I was like, to me, the spirit of theater is movement. It's not about like I never understood the sort
And
of like
collaboration.
well, okay, thank you. Exactly. That's exactly the other side of it. But because, like, to me, I never understood the sort of like idealization of like the regional theaters or like the desire for these big contracts when it was like the purpose of the regional theater system was for plays to travel through them. It was so that there was theaters in every city as they traveled, and you knew you would have lighting and a stage and and so it was like it was built for a tour. It wasn't built for for locals to work. And so I never I could never compute the the vitriol and the resentment and then the entitlement for locals to desire these contracts, when it was no, make a play and go put it on in Winnipeg, or go put it on in Halifax or something, those aren't really for you. And it's one of the frustrations I have, not just with Saskatchewan, but with regional theater attitudes in general. It's why I see that whole system as fundamentally broken from what it was intended to be, because all of theater has become so stagnant and so siloed, and the way that it breaks up is by doing things like experimenting with new mediums and experimenting with what can cross over, like theater is a fundamentally unique type of experience, in that if you have a story that works better as a movie, you should just go make that movie. You shouldn't bother putting it on stage,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that there aren't elements that can be incorporated from film or from digital media of any kind onto the stage and create a new experience, and I just never understood the that sort of that I loved, the siloing and the sort of but it was like a self-imposed isolation,
Yeah, and I'm like, it's strange. I don't know if I fully agree with you about the regional theater thing, because I do think that part of that, like the mandate of any sort of organization like that, should be to provide opportunities for artists so that they can step up to that kind of level.
Sure.
Um, but I agree, like it's not like there shouldn't be an entitlement to it. There should
Yeah.
be um that kind of like built into the mandate, and that I do think that there is more of a shift in that happening here, at least. I can't speak for elsewhere, that I've been liking. But at the same time, they're like the regional theater kind of system is not going to be the most flexible system. They have like the between the boards that they answer to, the
Yep.
funders that they answer to, they are not the places that can often do a lot of the experimentation that you're seeing from like the independent artists. But
100%.
then the independent artists aren't getting money from funders because the
Yep.
funders are busy funding the regional theaters, and
Yep.
it's a vicious
Oh yeah.
dysfunctional cycle.
Oh, the whole the Ouroboros of theater funding
Yeah.
is vulgar, in my eyes. What I mean about the regional stuff is that the concepts, as I vaguely remember it from theater history in when I
Yeah.
took it in 2007, was that the intention was to have places to tour theater, to tour plays, and to me, what I would posit would be that those theaters should be creating systems to make it easier for artists around the country to be considered for roles in all the theaters, not just the
Yes.
local
No,
theater,
and that's I agree with. Like it should be like when you're looking at the kind of like regional theater, it shouldn't be this one regional theater should be providing all these opportunities. It should
Exactly.
be this one is providing an opportunity for people to step up and get into that system.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
it is
And
like, you know, in an ideal world, there's still going to be too many actors, not
of
enough
course.
parts. There
Of
always
course.
is. People
Yeah.
want to be actors.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like the opportunity for training and for experience, that type of thing to me is the more important kind of like note to hit there. But yes, I always appreciated your like unique take on something. Um, because yeah, it's fun, and I don't feel like a lot of people always are able to bring something like that to the table.
Totally. Well, and it was, and I don't say this with, I'm sure this will come out sounding wrong, but it was my experience in the Saskatoon community was that it was almost people would go and spend a summer in Toronto and never book a part, and then come back and just live forever in Saskatoon, and think that that was their Rumspringa or something, and that was sort of all the worldly experience they ever needed,
Yeah,
and there was a really entrenched lack of curiosity about stepping out of the community that I
yeah,
never really understood, and having come into it from outside and having lived in multiple parts of the country and having worked in multiple parts of the country, I I couldn't understand the stubbornness of that's not how we do things around here. And it's well, what you do sucks. So, like, you know, like,
No, I like people are always asked, like, like if I start working with someone who is like a very established professional, that's like, why are you still working here? Like the especially like with the type of work you do, like it's just not the type of work that's usually done here. And I'm like, because I can't afford to go anywhere else. So I
well,
have to
yeah,
do it here.
big time, big time. Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, like I've been to England. I've seen lots of shows in England. I've seen lots of shows in New York and Toronto. I actually the only place I don't think I have seen a show is Vancouver. No, I have seen one in Vancouver. I saw an opera in Vancouver.
Oh, cool.
But I'm like I've done a lot of things. I like to see shows everywhere. I would like to work in more places, but I'm
Mm,
just like the financial reality of that is also just like
that's exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's I mean, and that's the other side of it, and I think that that's one of the failings of like, I think that's one of the things that whether it's the regional theater system or whatever, whoever it is at that tier, I think that's one of their failings in terms of building up the network nationally is that, like, they've dropped the ball in creating opportunities for artists to actually be able to feasibly travel in a way that hasn't been possible since the fucking 1970s, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's just, they've, you talked about like they've just hoovered up all the funding, like there are theaters that I've worked at where like are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from Canada Council. And if you look at the budget, not a penny of it even makes it past the head office, like it doesn't even make it to the stage because of the like exorbitant salaries and all the shit that's going on. So it's like, I don't even know how they're funding these plays because all the money's going in the pockets of the administrators, and so like that's a fundamental failure um in terms of what that theater is supposed to be doing for its community.
Yeah, and I like thankfully I've been lucky enough. I think over the last year I've worked with a lot of either people who are like really kind of devoted to like the indie theater scene. I don't can't remember if you actually had ever met Jennifer when she took over at the Globe as the AD. But
No,
like
we'd like emailed between each other,
because I'm
yeah.
like Jennifer's like interest and experience is so heavily rooted in that kind of like indie theater scene,
Mm.
which I think is really interesting because it's such a unique perspective for someone who is working at a theater at that level. But then
Mhm.
like just this last year, like working as the like Saskatchewan producer for Riser, which is a co-production with Why Not Theater. Like the people at Why Not Theater are also like everything they do there is this kind of like indie productions that are coming up through that system.
Mhm.
And their whole like purpose is these kind of new artists and new productions that they're
Mm.
providing platforms for. And it's just really interesting because all of these things that we've kind of been working towards that like are projects you never hear about in
Mhm.
the regular kind of theater community, I think here. Like I keep trying to explain to people like that Riser is specifically targeted to people who are in that kind of like weird in between of being emerging artists who have never had a professional gig doing something at a professional grade.
Mm.
And sure enough, like we had artists who were applying for funding from Canada Council this year, and because they were being undersigned by like Why Not Theater, they're getting $60,000 for an
Yeah.
independent production, and I'm like, that's incredible to me.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
For
Yeah.
their like for these little indie shows that are running for 10 performances here.
Mhm.
But now finally everyone's being paid and everyone's being paid
Exactly.
equity wages. And it's
Mhm.
like, great. That's what we
Mhm.
want.
Yeah. Oh god, and equity, and it's so funny how it's like we're all fighting tooth and nail for equity wages, which are still fucking nuts. Like you think about like what someone like you think about what a stage manager is being paid by equity rates, and like the argument of like you're working 6 days a week, crazy fucking hours, and then it's like it's for tooth and nail for like $30,000 a year,
Yeah.
and it's just like, and that's all they're demanding, like you look at like the writer's strike going on, and it's like they're not
I was just
asking
gonna
for
say the
ridiculous, right?
writers' strike and the oh my god, the strikes in the States, the whole AI acting thing, I
Yeah,
just like I can't even get into
yeah.
the nonsense that is just coming out. Like I think Fran Drescher did one of the interviews that she did talking about um the actors union, and she was just like these aren't people anymore. Like some of these executives that are proposing these ideas are like just so fundamentally detached
Mm-hmm.
from the reality of just being a working person
Mm-hmm.
that it never enters their mind that having someone come in, you scan them and you pay them for one day and replace them with an AI background person, like
That's a human.
that's a human. That was a
Yeah.
person who
Yeah.
should have been paid daily for their work.
Yeah. But it goes into their pockets, and so what do they care,
Yeah,
that once again I'm trying to like, "Ooh, we
we're
gotta
gonna
keep
keep
our
ripping
heads
at this
right.
work.
Right. Well, we'll keep on dipping our toes back in, but we got to kind of break it up a little bit. I mean, inevitably, this question is gonna probably loop us into a little, what's the equivalent of like a theater K hole, a little T hole. But one of the new questions I've been incorporating this season is this question of community. If friendship is like a bond between like kind of a one-on-one, then community is the sort of expansion of that. And again, as I've been caveating with all the questions this season, is that like it's one of those words where when I hear it, there's sort of like a pragmatic, obvious definition, and then there's this much more nebulous kind of almost like emotional definition within myself. And I'm really curious what, I guess, to start with, like, what does community mean to you?
This was the one I had a harder time with when I was looking at, because like the kind of like the, I guess, knee jerk reaction answer that I had was basically the same as the friendship one, that it's kind of like a group of people who are there for each other, to
Mm-hmm.
whatever extent, as much as they can. But then, like, I agree, there's a more interesting kind of nebulous definition of it, because like the first thing that came to my mind was the queer community,
Mm-hmm.
which at least, for the most part seems to be relatively united on a lot of things. But then you start delving into that, pulling at threads in that, and that falls apart. I shouldn't say
Mm-hmm.
falls apart, but that certainly like causes some wrinkles pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that really caused the wrinkle was when I was like, yeah, like the theater community, we can talk about the theater community here. That is a big thread to pull,
Mm-hmm.
because as we've kind of like mentioned in the other discussions, like things are so siloed off in,
Mm-hmm.
like, at least where we've been working,
Mm-hmm.
that like you remove one of those threads from the theater community, you might not even notice because you've never worked with those people, and you
Yeah.
are like, we're likely to never work with those people.
Yeah.
And so it means nothing in the
Mm-hmm.
end unless you put up a united front for something against something.
Mm-hmm.
Um
I mean, I
yeah.
would kind of posit that there is no theater community, at least on the sort of like municipal level of most cities I've worked in. There is no theater community. There's theaters, but I've never seen it as a full united community.
And that might be it, is that we say it's a community, but we don't really have any of the sort of like kind of functional things. I'd be interested to know what the kind of like, checklist is for things that would make up a community, and how
Yeah,
people are able to meet that.
that's an interesting question actually. I've yet to really formulate a genuine like sort of tangible definition for myself. I think I have like sort of like strands of stuff that I'm forming. I really like what you talk about like the idea of kind of having each other's back. I when I observe communities in the world, I was framing it the other day in another interview about how like when you think about people you disagree with, and you talk about like their politics, you talk about their culture or something like this. What I think a lot of people fail to remember is that these are people who are very likely rooting themselves in fear, and that fear uh, is for the protection of their group, right? They have a shared identity signifier, whatever it might be. Maybe it's that we all believe in the same book, or we all believe in the same old man. I don't know. Like it's all like they've found some kind of totem to unite them, and that has created a sort of, some might call it a pseudo community, some might call it a genuine community, but either way, the manifestation's the same in that they are willing to defend it, right? And I might not necessarily agree with the intention behind it, but like that is a form of community. Um, and so I think that sort of like there's a united something outside of you that I think is one of the sort of like pins of a community. Whether it's Star Wars or politics or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, and like the reason that the queer community had come to my head first was not particularly because I'm super involved in the queer community here
Sure.
anymore. I used to be more involved. but just by virtue of work have not been. But like I don't know how much you followed Saskatchewan politics. Um,
With all
the
the
Saskatchewan
pronoun shit.
government just passed some motions about education, and
Mm,
now children will be forcibly outed to their parents, and
mm-hmm.
all of the like traditional kind of anti-trans
Mm-hmm.
bullshit that's happened in the States has been hauled up
Mm-hmm.
to Saskatchewan now, hauled to New Brunswick. Um, but like when you had originally kind of sent the questions, like they were just getting ready to do their big protest in front of the legislature here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first thing that had come to mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like that to me is a really good kind of encapsulation of community, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, once again, in kind of my own head, comparing the theater community versus the queer community, I don't know if I would ever see a theater community do something even close to that
No.
here, because I don't know if I would actually define this as a community in a
Mm-hmm.
functional way.
Well, it would be self-serving in some way, you know what I mean? People would get involved if it benefited them, which is a difference, you know. And I think that's another element of communities that I observe in terms of like a healthy functioning community is someone who sort of has almost like a greater cause beyond just them, you know. It's something I don't personally like. I don't like the concept of fighting for something because you know, and I recognize the holes in this logic and I recognize the privilege in this logic, but it's like I do I want to believe that the ideal presentation of life is a choice of nonviolence. Like we're not wild animals anymore. We live in
We live in a
civilization,
society.
right? We live in. I was trying to stop myself from saying it, you know.
I could tell you were, and I was like, I
Right,
just have
right,
to say it.
right. You know, but it's like, you know, we live beyond just living in the wild anymore. And yes, we still have those instincts within us because we haven't evolved beyond them, but like we are in a place to be able to rationally question them. And we have been in that place for thousands of years, but we've decided to continually ignore that, you know? And so I think if you're choosing to fight, you've already chosen to lose in a certain way because to fight means you have a chance to win or lose, you know? And so to me it's more about like you have a cause that you're willing to push for, you know, and accept that there will be sort of gains and losses within that, you know. But yeah, and I would say that that's probably why I would frame the queer community being much more of an actual definition of a community over theater. You know.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm like, it's certainly something that I think, once again, like there's kind of gradations when we're talking about that kind of community, because of course, I think we can all agree it's good for the queer community to fight for, rights.
Yeah.
But, if Saskatoon and Regina decided to start some sort of intercity war between them for whatever reason, why? What's the point of community then? What's the
Yes.
actual point of that?
Yep. Yeah. There's a safety, right? There's a safety involved in community, and I think that that's where some communities thrive, even though they're actually pushing a really volatile sort of dogma or ideology, whereas like other communities, it doesn't catch on because the people who are pushing it aren't actually safe people, you know. You know, someone like a, you know, like MAGA or like the Proud Boys or something like that, like
Yeah.
that's a community, you know. And while they're not safe to people outside of their community, to the people inside the circle, those are ride or dies, you know. And so like of course you want in on that if you're lost and you're alone and you're looking for, you know,
And
someone to help
something
you.
about that connects with you. Yeah, no,
Exactly,
it's
you know,
I
and
was
then you buy in, right? Because then you
yeah.
get into it, you know. And so like there's a whether it's real or not, there's a perceived safety within the circle, you know, and you don't want to be out in the wild, right?
Yeah. And that's to say, I'm like, you don't want to be out in the wild. It's like a really good encapsulation of it. And it, tickles something primal.
Well, and that's just it. And that's the funny like dichotomy, right? Is that dialectics where it's like both and, you know, how it's like not one or the other. It's like
Yeah.
there's multiple truths, and it's like, you know, we do live in a society, and we are, you know, civilized people, but also we do have instincts of like, well, I don't want to be out alone in the winter, you know,
Yeah.
like I need people around me. I am a social monkey, right? So, you know, ape, sorry, I guess to be,
Yeah.
you know, proper. But um yeah, I don't know. It's all fucked.
If the multiverse is real,
Mm.
what's one thing you hope is true for one of your alternate selves?
I never got married.
I knew you were going to say that. We can talk about that when we're not recording.
Yeah, I think it's that I never met the friend who set me up on the blind date. But no, I mean there's loads of things, right? There's loads of things. I it's funny, it's an element of my therapy, which is to release those types of regrets and sort of to release those thoughts, and to really accept that it's like, well, that is what happened, and so why would I like keep hurting my feelings over what could have been, because it's not what is, and
Yes, I
so
do this too. This is
right.
also roughly where I'm at. Yep.
Yeah, so it's like quit hurting yourself, you're just sitting there punching yourself in the face over stuff that
Yeah.
like cannot be changed, so
You're
just change the
emotionally
next thing,
self-harming.
literally, right?
Yeah.
So but like, yeah, there's loads of things, I think, like I say, I don't want to frame them as regrets, but I think that it's like there were some pivot moments in my life where if I went a different way, things obviously would have been very different, I think if I hadn't let myself sort of like recloset myself after university, if I had like stayed open about my queerness from the get-go,
I was also gonna ask you about this because I've
yeah,
seen your Instagram and I
yeah.
have some questions based on
I'm
what I knew of you in my previous 2 years.
that's exactly right. You know what I mean? And so, there's that. There's questions of just like what city I would have moved into. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when I had the chance right after I graduated, I had options for moving to different cities. And so it's like, what if I had gone to, Toronto straight out of university? What if I hadn't taken the this or that, so yeah, there's fun questions in that, but I try to be very cautious around them because my brain is really good at here's point A, and in an instant, I've thought of every worst case scenario all the
Yep.
way to point Z,
Yep.
and so I have to be really mindful of like if I'm going to let myself explore those thoughts, I have to be really cautious around like watching the
Yeah.
spin out happen because it'll happen real fast and I'll get dysregulated instantly, So they're fun thoughts, but they're dangerous. What about
Yeah.
you? What do you think? What do you have do you have one like turning point?
I guess because I knew I would also kind of spin out if I picked like one particular thing, I said, I wish that other me was more forgiving of myself.
Hmm. Mhm. Mhm.
That that encompasses a lot and it
Mhm.
prevents me from spitting out. That is I wish alternate universe me is more forgiving of myself.
Yeah. Well, and I don't mean to, I sometimes get into little ruptures with a partner of mine about immediately jumping to fixer mode when people are actually just wanting to be heard. But I will say, just an impulse thought of mine is the nice thing is you're not dead yet, so you could potentially become that alternate reality of yourself,
Uh,
right? you know, you might,
that
you
is
might.
true.
I'm not saying you will or won't. I'm just saying you
That
could,
is true. And
right? Right?
that's what I hopefully working towards
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
because I think it's a basis for a lot of problems, a lot of anxiety.
Big time.
Uh,
Why don't we? I've only got the one other kind of core question, but just kind of clocking the time. Why don't we do your other question and then we'll kind of roll
you
into the
want
wrap.
the fun silly question now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So it is a scholastic book fair.
Oh, my dream.
What are you picking? You have a not unlimited, but regular amount of money. You can
Yeah.
buy definitely something. What are you getting at the
Well,
scholastic book fair?
obviously the new Goosebumps, no question.
Uh,
The new Goosebumps for sure. That's first. Um, actually, you know what? You know what is first is actually getting the flyer that they
yep.
would send out, right? And
Yeah.
just like going over it and like imagining all of them. I think definitely a Goosebumps. I would think about getting a poster because I always wanted to get a poster, but I never did. Um, because they always had fun like animal posters and shit,
Yeah.
probably a Where's Waldo because I think they would still sell those.
Oh,
I remember having
I
a
didn't even
ton of
think of
them.
Where's Waldo. Where's Waldo's a very good choice.
Right? Right?
Yeah,
I wanna say they were at Scholastic Book Fairs. I just know I
I'm
had a
sure
bunch, so I have
there.
right? I
We
have
had
to
I
assume they were.
Spy, and I Spy was nothing compared to Where's Waldo.
Yes. Oh my god. Yeah, the poor man's Where's Waldo, you know?
The strange Victorian ghost energy that emanates from every I Spy.
Um, I think, oh man. I just, to me, it was like I wish I could just bottle the feeling of being inside the folders, Like just the excitement. I honestly, I think the reason why I'm like incurably addicted to going to bookstores is because of the Scholastic Book Fair, because like there's such like a comfort in just being around bookshelves, and so I think I would exactly. Oh, I mean, it's not in shot, but like I've got four other bookshelves here,
Yeah.
like um it's yeah, obviously the new Goosebumps. I'm trying to think of like other. I got really big into this author that no one remembers. His the author was Eric Wilson, and he wrote these like I can't remember. It was like Jack and Jane or something. Tom and Jane. They were brother and sister. They were sort of like Hardy Boys.
This
Um,
kind of sounds
they
familiar,
were
but I'm
like
like,
they were mysteries, but they were set in like Canadian landmarks. So there was like
"Oh, yes,
the
okay, I do
Vampires
know."
of Montreal or like
Yeah.
Crisis at Disneyland or or
I
like
do kind of know what you're talking about. I'm like,
Bears at Vancouver.
I need to see the covers, that's the big thing
Yeah,
because 'cause I'm like, the Scholastic Book Fair experience, I'm like, "You need to see the covers."
big time,
Um,
big time.
I'm kind of laughing though because my first thought was also R.L. Stein, the first one,
Exactly.
but not
Yep.
because I read Goosebumps as a child. I never did read Goosebumps as a child.
Oh, was it Fear Street or
Well, my first thought was I would want a Fear Street book because
yeah,
as an adult, that was what got me into R.L. Stein was I watched the Fear Street
right.
trilogy on Netflix, and I was like, "This is bomb."
It was so good.
So
That's what
good.
yes, actually, I've been meaning that's gonna be my very first when October hits, that's gonna be the first thing I'm planning to watch, actually. I try to watch a one horror movie every day for October, and I think I'm gonna open this year with that Fear Street because I haven't watched it since it came out, and I remember it ruling.
I I've watched it so many times, and I think
Mm.
the first time I watched it was, like, a year and a half ago, and I've watched the whole thing so many times since, and I've went to all of my friends who had seen it, and they were like, "Oh, like, yeah, I watched the first one, and, like, it was fine, so I didn't watch the rest." I was like, "No, because you have to watch all of them. You
Yeah,
have to watch all
yeah.
of them."
It's
They
one of the
only are like, I shouldn't say that. The second one, I think, is great on its own completely,
yes. Yeah.
but I'm like, the first one and the third one really only make sense if you've watched all 3 of them,
Oh,
and then
fully.
the whole thing is so much more rewarding.
Yes. Well,
Oh
and I
my
would I got into a little bit of a debate, right when it came out because I was so blown away by it that I was like, this is one of the like like basically my thesis was like this is the modern example of a trilogy that bucks this trend and actually gets better with each iteration,
yeah.
like it's so rare for the third one to be the best one, but I think the third one is the best one, and
I mean,
only
if
because
for
it
nothing
failed.
else, the emotional payoff that comes in the
Yes.
third one is so incredibly, like, rich and
Yep.
interesting
Yep.
and
Yep.
fulfilling.
Exactly. Oh, I know. Yeah, we got it. I forget who I was talking to. I think it was I must have still been in Saskatoon at the time, but but we were trying to remember movie trilogies where the third one was the best one, and it's like it's there ain't many,
Not The Godfather.
right? Well, exactly, right. I think we came up with oh, what was it? The Born trilogy. The third one is kind of the best, but only really if you've watched all three. Um and there was like one other one. I can't even think of it now because even that was
I'm
like
not gonna
rickety.
I'm not gonna argue the point. I could see, and I will accept the point from some people that Last Crusade might be the best Indiana Jones.
Oh no, it's the worst one.
Oh, I don't think so. Temple of Doom exists.
No, Temple Doom rules. Oh, come on.
Temple of Doom, yes, rules. I
Kalima.
agree that it rules. I agree all 3 of them rule,
Right.
especially in relation to the 4th one. Um,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
like, but when you I think that objectively, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade are easily the 2 best in the original trilogy, and I
Mm.
I would argue it's Raiders, just because I think Raiders is like a
Oh, of
perfect film.
course. Oh, of course. Yeah, the
It's a
first one is
perfect
easily the
film.
best one. Yeah, yeah. I oh my god, I love this fucking dirty ass movie talk. I when I
Off the
ask
field talk. Now
right,
this is what's happening.
literally, what I always ask about Indiana Jones is when was the last time you actually watched them?
Oh, I watched. Okay, I watched Young Indiana Jones last. That would have been the last thing I would have watched.
The reason I ask it is because if you haven't gone back and watched them recently, like the third one is just a worse version of the first one. Like it's like structured
Yeah,
almost identically, and it's
I
just
would agree with
less
that.
fun,
Like, once
you know?
again, I don't think I would make the argument, but I would entertain the argument from someone.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know why I get so no, I do know why, because I have oppositional defiance, but I get so like dug in about Indiana Jones because I'm like, no, fuck Sean Connery. He ruins everything, you know? He is not the best Bond, and you're lying to yourself if you say he is,
I
you
would
know?
agree that he's not the best Bond.
It's,
I fully agree with you,
that's Roger Moore, you know?
and I don't think it's right. Okay, so this is very fun because my partner also does not agree with me. I think personally, I love George Lazenby's.
He's actually really good. That movie's actually really good.
It's a great
Yeah.
movie. I'm like,
Yeah.
just generally on Her Majesty's Secret Service, bomb.
Yeah.
Such a good Bond movie.
Yep. The
And I'm
one
like,
that sorry, I didn't mean to
no.
cut you off there.
But my partner, Timothy
Doesn't buy
Dalton,
it.
he loves Timothy.
Oh, you know, the reason I don't count Timothy Dalton is that I think he's great, but his movies suck, you know?
I
Whereas
just,
George Lazenby's is a good movie, you know, so it's
yeah.
easier to like him.
Well, and I'm like, I don't know if I would say the movies suck, but I'm like, to me, they don't feel like Bond movies.
No, no, they're like Contra. They're trying to be like commando movies, you know? Although I do love young Benicio del Toro, you know? For years I'd always be like, "We gave her a honeymoon," you know? But, um, but the thing about Roger Moore for me, it's I mean, he was the first Bond I really watched as a kid, and so I loved him because he was so kid friendly. At least
Yeah,
you think he is. But for me, it's there is not a single Roger Moore movie where the theme song isn't an absolute all timer. Like
that is
his
fair.
run is the best music that's ever been made. You know, like
No,
I
that is
still
fair.
listen to like I'll listen to those theme songs just as like on my
Yep.
playlist. You know, like oh, fucking
No, all
incredible.
time high.
Forget about it. Forget about it. You know? Oh God, it's so good. Um, oh God, I need to just go put that on now. But, um, you know, I've only got one other question, which is just sort of like the tip of the week moment. But like before we do, you know, I really want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me. You know, I know. Look, we could talk for hours more, and we could get much deeper and darker. And you know, there's probably potential that we'll stop recording and chat a little longer and kind of talk some
Probably.
things.
I
But
was like, now I have to figure out what your first week of horror movies is in October. I've been
literally.
rewatching Friday the 13th, and I'm like, what a ride.
Yes. Have you gotten to Axel? I'm not gonna fake any more orgasms for you.
Not quite. I think that's literally the next one.
Yes, it's right at the start. It's my all-time favorite. I talked about it earlier in a different interview, and it's my all-time favorite horror movie line. I every time.
I'm just like, I desperately want to get to Jason X again because I
Oh,
love it. It's so stupid. It's so stupid in all of the best ways. And
the two in the like virtual room when he's got the two
yeah,
women in the sleeping
he's
bag
back.
and he's just back and forth. It's outrageous.
No, and Leah's just like, I am not watching that one. I will not watch that one again.
Oh,
I cannot do it.
it's absurd. It's so good too. I mean, all of them are. You know, I in the other interview, I talked about how I was like, I see Jason as like a serial killing dildo. Like it's just like
Yeah, a little bit.
he's just a nothing. He's just a nothing thing, you know. And it's awful and vulgar and gratuitous and so base and so fucking detrimental to like mental health and society as a whole. But there's something like bizarrely and perversely comforting about slasher movies that I like. I
Yeah,
think the people who get it, get it. The people who don't, that's fine. You know, like
yeah.
there's no way I'm ever going to convert you, you know? But
No, I would agree. I was watching. I don't know if you watch Dead Meat at all or listen to
oh,
Dead
like
Meat.
the kill count, like the
Yeah,
YouTube channel? Oh yeah, I
yeah, or their
love them.
podcast.
Yeah.
They, I think it was them at least, described the 2009 Friday the 13th as kind of like a greatest hits of all of the other ones, and it
Yes.
literally 180 in my opinion of that movie because I was like, that movie is horrid,
Yeah.
and now I have watched it and actually kind of love it because I'm like,
Yeah.
it is the best of all the previous Friday the 13th.
They just
It's the best
condensed it all.
version of Jason, the best kind of beats from the previous ones,
Mhm.
the funniest kills.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a few by the time a movie like that, by the time you're making a movie in 2009 and you're like flashing tits though, like I think you've lost the plot, but like there's something to me about like 1970s boobs versus like 2010 boobs that I'm like, "Ooh, I don't like this," but that I don't know. That's just I'm sure that's some kind of like internalized misogyny that I have to unpack myself, you know, but
We had the longest conversation about breasts in horror movies like 2 months ago because my brother was here doing a show and one of his actors was staying with us and I showed them Trick or Treat for the first time. They never
oh,
ever seen Trick or Treat. And that werewolf transformation sequence, they were just like, why? Why are there hard nipples? And I'm like, I don't know, it's 2010 or whatever.
yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, they kind of missed the plot, but you know, that's that's a great one.
It's a
Jesus
great
Christ.
movie.
Yeah. Okay, we have to wrap this part up because we will talk for hours about it. But you
Yeah.
know, before I get to the question, I really want to say thank you, and I want to just say like, you know, you've without going deep in it and without spinning us off too much, like, you know, I had a really shit end to my experience with SBC and with Saskatoon as a whole. And I know that one of the fallouts of that was losing contact and losing connection with you. And I'm really grateful that you reached out, and I'm really grateful that you reconnected. This hour has really reminded me that I absolutely adore you, and it really, yeah, this has meant a lot to me, and so I really want to thank you for coming on and chatting with me and just being as amazing as you are, you know.
Thank you, James. Well, I don't know how to respond to that. Like I said, I miss you on the board. I miss like your presence in the community because I think that we don't have enough people who think
Mm,
like you and make the kind of suggestions that you do. And like, I mean, I know you had a shit time right at the end, but I'm like, your attitude to me was always great.
yeah.
I always loved having you around.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The very last question is a little kind of tip for the listeners. I always love to leave on like a little bit of like a try this at home. So what's one thing you think people could do to try and be a better friend, either to themselves or to their community this week?
This week in particular.
Yeah, just kind of as a little. I mean, recognizing the episode's going to come out in like 2 months, but you know,
Okay, I would say this week in particular, I was like, start celebrating Halloween now.
right?
It makes everyone's life better.
Yeah.
Um, get together with people. If this episode's coming out in 2 months, we're going to be in the dead of winter. Get together with people. It
Hmm.
honestly makes such a difference in the middle of winter when you see your friends.
Hmm. Hmm. Like, kind of see them in person. You mean like just like
Yeah,
with
I
touch a
mean, see them
friend?
in person. I mean,
Yeah.
make a plan and do something, even if you are not going out. I am not a going out person. I like people coming to my house and just
Hmm.
chilling, ordering pizza and doing nothing.
Yeah.
But just do something in person. It makes such a difference in the middle of winter.
Yeah. Man, I mean, and it's like obviously, I mean, the Saskatchewan winters are fucking brutal, but it's like it's just as isolating out here with the, you know, like this Vancouver kind of dies
In the woods.
after, yeah,
Yeah,
right, you
I'm like,
know, the
you're literally
rain,
just like kind of
right.
in your own little like apartment shacks, basically.
Literally, that's a perfect way of putting it. um yeah, no, I love that, and I just, you know, I think the more we get away from you know, I mean, again, I know this is a huge topic that I'm accidentally opening up, but it's like, you know, the anxiety around seeing people in person has been so real for so long that I think we've lost the excitement that comes out of like kind of attuning to like a physical body around you, and the regulation that comes out of that, and so yeah, I absolutely second that suggestion of like
Yeah.
go
And like,
touch a friend.
yep. And I'm like, you can be as comfortable as you want. I still mask up when I go out in public.
Exactly.
Depending who's coming here, I still mask up at my own house. You can
Mm-hmm.
do whatever,
Yep.
but be around your friends in person. Ugh.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much one more time. Is there anywhere you'd like listeners to find you? Anything kind of coming up in future
I
months
mean,
or
not
different
really. I
gigs?
avoid social media like the plague as much as
Super
possible.
fair.
I doom scroll Instagram now because it's at least the safest thing for me to doom scroll. Worst thing I get is ads.
Yes, yes. Well, and the algorithms change too, so it's like you barely see your friends anymore. It is mostly ads now.
Oh God, yeah. It is fine. I would rather look at some beautiful leather bag than some asshole's thoughts on the current political situation.
Literally, literally. Fuck. Well, good luck with that. God bless. And thank you one more time. I hope you have yourself just the best friggin' day.
You too, James.
And that's it. Thank you one more time to Landon for coming on the show. What a pleasure it was to catch up with him. We ended up chatting for like a solid hour or two after we hung up, and the tea that was spilt. If you love the show, please make sure to rate and review it anywhere you listened. They help out so much, and it is completely free for you. Speaking of free, have you signed up for the Friendless Substack yet? Every Wednesday, straight to your inbox, you're getting updates with a curated playlist for the month, along with recommendations for movies, music, books, poems, all kinds of fun stuff, along with a little mini essay from yours truly, and a few little goodies sprinkled in here and there, depending on what my energy level is. Speaking of energy, good old insomnia's kicked in yet again, and I did not sleep, so I have nothing else to add here. I'm just going to wrap this up with a thank you so much. I appreciate you listening every week, coming back for more, and I hope to see you back next week with a brand new episode. But what do I always say? Let's not worry about that for now, because that is then, and this is now. So for now, I'll just say I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweeties.